at the end of the day, you're exhausted and you don't feel like you've accomplished a whole lot. True? Amen. But you're also patting yourself on the back because you're a multitasker who's been able to manage multiple things at once. And you think to yourself, that's just the way 21st century life is supposed to be. And you think that while you're surfing Facebook and heating up a meal in the microwave. You know, we like to think that the ability to multitask demonstrates that we are intelligent and that our brains are capable of handling a lot of input and sorting it all out. Employers often put down multitasking as a positive attribute for job applicants. And many people believe that juggling lots of mental tasks at once is actually good for the brain. But there's some current research out there that's showing that multitasking can be a brain drain that exhausts the mind, that zaps cognitive resources, and if left unchecked, condemns us to early mental decline and decreased sharpness. Looks like our brains may be designed to do only one thing at a time. That's why talking and texting while driving is such a bad idea. If that's true for our brains, then the question is whether it's also true for our spiritual lives. After all, we believe that the whole person is connected. Body, mind, and spirit. There's that connection, which makes us whole. But like the rest of our lives, we're often prone to spiritual multitasking, believing that busyness and more information are signs of spiritual maturity. Churches tend to add more and more activities to the schedules. And many devout people feel they're failing spiritually if they're not involved in multiple programs for learning and mission. It's easy for us to become distracted, exhausted, and burned out trying to multitask great things for God. I've seen it happen over and over and over again in the church. And the Apostle Paul understood this, which is why he writes to young Timothy about staying focused on what really matters. The old apostle tells his protege to get in the habit of simplifying his spiritual life so he can be the best Christian leader he can be. One who presents himself to God as an approved worker, who has no need to be ashamed, who rightly explains the word of truth, as Paul puts it. Paul encourages Timothy to focus on this one task, because the gospel itself is a single tasking message. Remember Jesus Christ, raised from the dead, a descendant of David. When Christians try to take the gospel and make it a multitasking to-do list of spiritual hoops to jump through, it clouds the real message. Remember Jesus Christ, raised from the dead, a descendant of David. As Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, if Jesus hadn't been raised from the dead, then nothing matters. If he has been raised from the dead, however, then nothing else matters. Paul was willing to suffer hardship and being chained like a criminal for the sake of the salvation that is in Jesus Christ, made possible by Christ's death and resurrection. And the life of the Christian is singularly focused on this truth. Which is why Paul says, if we have died with him, we will also live with him. If we endure, we will also reign with him. On the other hand, if we allow distraction and multiple mixed messages to cloud our thinking and constantly switch our attention from one theological fad to another, we're likely to deny Jesus and become faithless. And there's lots of fads out there. We can wind up, as Paul says, wrangling over words and getting into theological and political arguments rather than keeping focused on the truth. Such distracting talk does no good, but only ruins those who are listening. Verse 14. Stella just shared. And Paul gives young Timothy some advice on how to stay focused on the single task of proclaiming the gospel. Remember Jesus Christ, raised from the dead, a descendant of David. That gospel. Paul's list focuses on how to get your spirit back in shape after what might have been a long time dealing with spiritual distractions. First, Paul says, present yourself to God as one approved by him. Focus each day on pleasing God and seeking God's approval, and everything else will fall into priority order. Paul isn't talking about earning God's approval through works, but rather seeing our work as a response to what God has done for us in the death and resurrection of Jesus. If we remember the core of the gospel at the start of every day and shape our thoughts and our activities accordingly, we're more likely to remain focused on what really matters. 2, Paul says, be a worker who has no need to be ashamed. Paul was not ashamed of the gospel, and we shouldn't be either. It's the power of God for salvation, for the salvation of the world. Romans chapter 1. We might be tempted to think that the gospel is something secondary, private, and less important than the other work that we do. In fact, we might see our spiritual lives separate from the rest of our lives and act differently the rest of the week than we do on Sunday. The gospel, however, brings everything into alignment so that our lives are consistently focused on the way of Jesus. When we're focused on the gospel and living our lives in ways that please God, there will be no secrets, no divisions of our focus, and no cause for shame. 3, Paul says to rightly explain, and I add to it, and represent the word of truth. Rightly explain and represent the word of truth. To rightly explain, literally cut straight the truth of the gospel. This is an antidote to the distraction of wrangling arguments and other distractions. You know, we don't need to engage in this kind of constant trolling that characterizes social media and public discourse these days. Constantly trolling. Instead, we simply state what we believe. And perhaps even more importantly, we demonstrate how it works by living it out consistently day to day. We cut through all the endless verbal junk that confronts us constantly and only engage in exchanges that accomplish God's purposes and please God in both their tone and content. Single-tasking spirituality will lead us toward becoming healthier disciples of Jesus who are focused, effective, and productive for the kingdom of God. The Christian life can sometimes seem complicated and demanding. I can remember sitting back there in the pews where you're at, and I hear the preacher preach about this, and the preacher preach about that, and I hear a Sunday school teacher teach about this, teach about that. And I'm thinking to myself, good grief, how can anyone be a Christian and do all of that? Christian life can sometimes seem complicated and demanding. So let's dial it back a bit. And remember that the gospel is pretty simple. Jesus, in fact, loved to keep things simple. He took 613 commandments and distilled them into two. Love God, love your neighbor. Love God, love your neighbor. He gives his disciples a great commission, not a great to-do list. For believers, there does not need to be a multitude of tasks that must be accomplished all at once and at the same time. Love God, love your neighbor, and be a good worker. Pretty much sums it up. Paul hit it right on the nail. Remember Jesus Christ, raised from the dead, a descendant of David. I'm going to ask you to stand, and we're going to sing the good news of the gospel. You'll recognize the hymn. We sing it on Easter, but it's the good news. Let's stand as we sing the good news together. Don't forget the coffee and donuts after the service.